Hey everybody, Grace here. Welcome to another video. This is going to be another kind of unscripted deck showcase where we're going to look at some cool GOAT format strategies, and I will show some matches kind of showing off the deck. And today we are looking at some Earth Return. This deck is sick. This is probably, as the title implies, one of the most aggressive, if not the most aggressive deck that I've ever played in this format. It is like the ultimate send it deck. You just put bodies on board as quickly as possible and you just get after your opponent's life points and you just kill them in like 3 turns. It's nasty. And I want to talk about it a little bit. So I'm going to do a quick little detour here to talk about YouTube and decks and expectations real quick. So if you want to get to the actual content, just skip forward a little bit. I'll put some timestamps in the video so that you can see. But I just like making YouTube videos about different decks and stuff. This is something that every like Yu-Gi-Oh YouTuber does, and I just kind of want to like pull back the curtain a little bit and talk about something, namely just like expectations. I feel like to get views on videos, people will employ the same sort of techniques that I do to like imply that this deck is busted or this is the new thing or blah 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 blah, and that's kind of just what you have to do on YouTube these days. But at the same time, it doesn't always like sit super right with me because I just don't want to like lead anybody astray, or if somebody's getting into the format, I don't want them to be like disappointed when they try to play my fairy deck or they play this deck and they just it just doesn't go as well as I hyped it up in the video. Like, I mean, I think in most instances, like if you really just want to win, you'd be better off playing some of the more well-established decks. But at the same time, like I think these strategies are good. Like I wouldn't make a video about a deck that I don't believe can hang competitively. But at the same time, I just don't want to lead anybody astray, right? I don't want to like, give anybody false expectations on any of these videos that I ever make. So I just wanted to just be kind of honest, regardless of what the, thumbnail or whatever says, like, most of the stuff I'm looking at is not, tier 1, but at the same time, it's good. All right, so with that out of the way, what we're looking at here is Earth Return. This deck, like I said, it is sick. It is also really fun to play. So basically we're using some of the kind of core concepts behind Earth Aggro, and I am changing them a bit to the deck plays a bit differently than your standard Earth Aggro list, but kind of using the same core concepts. So if you're kind of newer to GOAT format, you don't know how Earth Aggro works. Earth Aggro is a very popular, I wouldn't say very popular, it is a played deck in the format. Competitively, it is, I would say, tier 2. It's very good. It got second place at the World Championships this year. It's, people are, emerging more and more with it. There's some really good dedicated Earth Aggro players that really know what they're doing with the deck. And it's just the ultimate, like, in-your-face strategy. And so the way it works is it uses these big beaters, specifically cards like Goblin Attack Force as 3 of, and this is a warrior, so you can search it with reinforcement of the army. Has 2300 attack, which is giant for GOAT format. Now the effect obviously isn't great. It gets turned to defense after it attacks, but that's not really the point. The point is that this is just a big old beat stick. It just does 2300 damage. I've heard this mentioned several times before, but it's basically just a 2300 damage burn card. It just swings in there and gets after your opponent's life points, does a quarter of their life points in 1 turn, which is significant, right? And so kind of you run like these Earths, and then you run some other utility Earth monsters, such as Exiled Force, which is just the ultimate 1-for-1 removal. You run Mystic Swordsman level 2, which gets after face down monsters. You run DD Assailant, which is, good kind of 1-for-1 removal type monster that also has a pretty decent stat line in and of itself. And so you run like these kind of core, and so as these Earth monsters filter into the grave, you then can summon cards like Gigantes, which is another giant body, 1900, is pretty significant in the format, and you summon it by banishing an Earth monster from your graveyard. And so you swarm the field with these Earth monsters, get after your opponent's hitbox, and take them down before they really can establish anything. That's kind of the goal of Earth Aggro. And so what this version of the deck does is kind of expands upon that by playing Return from a different dimension, because we are banishing monsters to summon Gigantes. The Rock Spirit is kind of a lesser played, it's like Gigantes Light, basically, same sort of thing. You summon it by banishing an earth monster from your graveyard. And so you're banishing a lot of these big beaters from your grave, specifically like Goblin Attack Force. You get in there for 2,300, then it goes to defense and your opponent runs it back over. And then you go back over the top with the Gigantes plus a DD Assailant or something, and you've already done like 4,000 damage. And it's pretty significant how quickly it adds up. And so that's kind of the whole idea of Earth aggro. But like I said, we're adding Return into the mix. Now, Return has been played in Earth type strategies before, but not alongside Solemn Judgment, at least that I have seen. And so typically the Earth aggro decks don't play Solemn Judgment. They mostly have a little bit of a higher monster count, typically max out on like Dust Tornado, sometimes as high as 3 Smashing Ground, just to really simplify things, really get after the life points of your opponent very quickly. And I think the reason that most Earth aggro decks don't play Solemn Judgment, where, you know, another aggressive deck like Warriors that does similar things to the Earth aggro strategy does play Solemn Judgment. I think it's namely because like Warriors really aim to simplify the game state. They aim to be in those spots where, you know, against Chaos Turbo, you have a Kaiku on board and a Solemn set behind. And then like, what's your opponent going to do? If they have an answer to the Kaiku, you just Solemn it. And then, you know, they basically just lose. That's what, you know, Warrior really wants to simplify the game state as quickly as possible, where I feel like Earth aggro isn't necessarily trying to simplify the game state as much. They don't really care about that as much. Obviously, they don't mind it, but I think it's just about getting after the life points of your opponent and often stealing games. If you're behind in card advantage playing Earth aggro, it doesn't feel great, but at the same time, like all it takes is one clean Goblin Attack Force attack to just end your opponent. So I don't feel like Earth cares as much about simplifying the game state. They don't mind it, but they really just want to focus on getting you after your opponent's life points, which is why this deck typically hasn't played Solemn Judgment. But typically, Return pairs well with Solemn Judgment because these are cards that pay half your life points to activate. So that has its pros, it has its cons, but they're typically played together often because, you know, once you get to a certain, you know, low life point count, like they become invaluable. Like you basically activate them for free, right? Because if you're at, you know, 200 life points, what's 100, you know, to activate a card that basically says no to anything, or a card that lets you put 6,000 damage on board in one turn. So that's basically the idea behind it. And then also we are running Jirai Gumo. Shout out to DGZ Rampage. If you're going to play this card, you got to give that man a shout out. This is another nasty 2,200 Earth monster that just does a ton of damage, gets over Zombira, but at the same time, it has that effect where you lose half your life points. But in a deck like this, where you're using a lot of cards that lose half your life points, it kind of has some nice value in certain instances. So the idea of the deck, like I said, you're getting your Earth monsters into the grave, you're banishing them, and then you're hitting them with Return. Just another method for putting damage on the board as quickly as possible. One of the kind of obvious downsides of a deck like this is that because we're consistently paying half our life points for, you know, these cards, obviously we're just one, you know, Ring of Destruction away from just straight up losing. But, you know, between Dust Tornado, Solemn Judgment, there's ways we can, you know, avoid dying to Ring, such as, you know, obviously solemning it or hitting it in the end phase. You know, sometimes it's kind of telegraphed when your opponent is trying to, you know, ring you for game just based off what they do, and then they set the one, and, you know, you pop it with the dust and you live. Now that's, you know, obviously that's a bit idealistic, you know, that doesn't always happen. Sometimes, yeah, you do just get the game stolen from you by Ring, but also you're getting after your opponent's life points so quickly that very often Ring like will kill both of you, which, you know, is fine in a lot of instances. So I think that kind of summarizes it. I've got a Magic Cylinder in here because why not? You know, you're already doing so much damage. You know, maybe this isn't the best card in the world, but I think in a deck like this, it's just fun to play. And, you know, I like to add a little spice tech in there, and it's not bad. It's serviceable. You'll see in one of these replays, it's, you know, pretty much wins me a game at one point. What else is there to say? I want to talk a little bit how to play this deck properly. Now, a lot of people will say that this deck is just like a caveman deck where you just slam cards and you just send it every time, which is true to a certain extent, 100%. Like there is definitely games that you take, requires very little thought, and you just summon your monsters and attack and kill your opponent. But there is a lot of kind of risk-reward weighing that goes into playing a deck like this. You can't always just play with like 100% foot on the gas pedal aggression, because you're very often going to run into Mirror Force or Torrential, and it's going to completely ruin you. But at the same time, if you play too passive and you try too hard to play around these cards, you give your opponent time to kind of establish themselves, especially against a deck like Chaos Turbo or something like Control. Like, you just don't want to give them time to amass cards, because they will eventually grind you out. But at the same time, like, you just, you really got to get after it. And so sometimes you have to like take that risk reward and say, you know what, if they have a Mirror Force, I have to go for it here. Or there's times where you say, you know what, I can play a little more passive, still do some damage, but not risk losing everything I have. So it's weighing the risk reward is kind of like the major skill component of a deck like this. But one of the things that is nice is, because we're playing Return, it does allow us to like steal games late against decks like Chaos Turbo. If we go really late, you really get that graveyard fill up full of earths and get the banish pile filled up full of earths, and then you just hit this, nasty return at the end of the game. The other last thing I want to mention is that this deck does play a little bit differently than Chaos Return. A deck that runs triple Spy, triple Dekoichi, the kind of idea of that deck, which, Chaos Return is a very powerful deck, very underrated. It's been doing really well in tournaments lately. The idea of a deck like that is you have these flips and you don't mind when they get knocked, because they get knocked, and then you summon, you basically have 3600 damage just sitting in your banish pile after they knock your Spy or after you knock their Spy. And so the returns are much bigger in a deck like Chaos Return, where this deck, in my opinion, just based off of the games that I've played, it's not doing these massive like bring back 3 or 4 earths to steal the game. Usually it's just one Goblin Attack Force, basically, like, that I'll bring back just to finish things off. Like, that's kind of the way it works. And there's also games I played where like I haven't even used Return to like end the game. Sometimes it'll be, I have a good opportunity to use it to bring back like a Jirai Gumo or something. I'll do it. I'll get my opponent down to 2,000 life points, knowing that, at some point in the game, I'll draw a ring, I'll get a Cylinder, I'll get a clean Goblin Attack Force attack to go through to finish the opponent off. Because, relative to a lot of Return decks, this is playing a little bit of a smaller monster count. So Return is not in this deck used to like do these massive 8,000 damage pushes. You're chipping away like you normally would do with Earth Aggro, and the Return is just a little extra gas in the tank to get you over the finish line. Now, for the side deck, triple King Tiger, triple Book. Control is always a tough matchup for aggressive decks, so that is why we're playing this. Maybe you could look at some Ashura, Big Bang type stuff, but really you don't want to play Ashura Priest in Earth, because, King Tiger isn't Earth himself, so he floats with the engine really well. Also, you save this for burn, you use this for Reasoning Gate, plenty of other strategies, but mainly for control. And same with the kind of triple Book, just to deal with control, RGT, stuff like that. Additional smashing, kind of for aggressive decks or Reasoning Gate, stuff like that. Swords to slow down other aggressive decks. Ninja Grandmaster Sasuke, I like siding one of these because you can search it off of Rhoda, and namely for like warrior decks that like to side into like triple Spy, double Reaper, stuff like that, that can really slow down a deck like this. I don't side it in against Chaos Turbo unless I see that they're running Spirit Reapers, but it can be a good use case in certain instances. Double Walk, Berserk Gorilla, I already got one in the main, just a big body. It's like good against like warriors and other aggressive decks. And this is kind of the the secret sauce here, the double Zing. Basically, people against Earth typically don't expect Zing, because typically Earth type decks play like triple Dust Tornado, and they're really focused. Like Earth decks really don't set that many back row. They usually just set like a Dust Tornado or a ring or something, and then they end phase dust your spell trap and then swing in with a big monster. Where this deck is actually setting a lot of stuff sometimes, because you have Return, because you have Solemns to protect against heavy. So basically games 2 and 3 in certain matchups, I'll take out the Dust Tornadoes and bring in both the Zings, and it usually completely catches my opponent off guard. The Mobius, this is mainly for like burn, stuff like that, stall type decks. So that is a bit of the profile. Let's look at some matches. I played quite a few recently, and they were pretty fun. And these, replays are very interesting. So let's get into it. And you know, some of these I'm not playing against the best decks in the world, and sometimes I question my opponent's decision making in some of these instances, but you know what? Whatever. All right. So we start off. A couple options. I kind of like just summoning Goblin Attack Force and then setting Ring, basically saying like, deal with it. You know, what are you gonna do? Because if they have like a Tsukiyomi, we have the Ring for it. And I normally wouldn't always do this. I do this because I have an Exiled in hand. So you don't want to always summon this big beater turn 1 very often unless you have some sort of way to deal with face down monsters, because if my opponent were to set a Gravekeeper Spy, for example, one of the most popular cards in the format, they were to, you know, set that across from my Goblin Attack Force, I'm going to attack, I'm going to kill one of the spies, but this is going to go to defense and get ran back over by either the spy or another monster that my opponent summons, and I'll have done no damage. So I want to kind of, you know, not always do this, like I said, unless I have an Exile, unless I have a Rhoda, unless I have a Nobleman, something along those lines. So I don't know if it's completely necessary to set the Ring, to be honest. Like I could even just set this and say deal with it, but I worry a little bit about like Tsukiyomi or creature swap or other weird stuff like that. So I think it's reasonable to set the Ring. I could set the Solemn in return as well, but if I Solemn, then my Ring becomes a bit worse. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't really want to have to Solemn to protect a return that's not doing anything yet. I guess that's my thinking behind it. So we get duoed, unfortunately. They hit return, and I decided to ditch the Solemn, namely because Solemn is quite a bit better in the later stages of the game. It's early game. I just want to have those 1-for-1 removals. Definitely want to keep the Exiled. And then I think between Snatch and Solemn, it's pretty close, but I decided to get rid of the Solemn. My opponent sets a monster, sets 1, and this is just exactly what we want. So I have 2 options. I can either summon the Mystic Swordsman level 2 and attack, or pop the Exiled, or pop the face down with the Exiled and attack with the Goblin Attack Force, of course. Not quite sure which one's the best. Obviously, it depends on, you know, what you assume your opponent's spell trap to be. Early game, I definitely anticipate that he could have a Ring or a Mirror Force or a Torrential or something along those lines potentially set. So I don't want to get crazy with the Mystic Swordsman level 2, so I'm just going to pop it with the Exile. And then if, you know, for whatever reason they use like a Raigeki Break, or they're forced to use a Battle Trap or a Ring or something on this Goblin Attack Force, then that'll only, you know, pave the way more for Mystic Swordsman level 2, especially knowing that we're up against a deck that runs flips. That's a hefty chunk of damage right there. I mean, come on, 2,300. What you gonna do? We already got our opponent at 4,700. We got a Ring set. It's like turn 3, isn't it? This is just what the deck does. So they set 1 back. Goes to my turn. Draw into a Solemn, which is a very nice pickup now, especially because the game state's getting a bit simplified. We're really getting after it. Mystic Swordsman level 2 is just gonna try to get in here. You know, this might not always go through, but if it doesn't, I probably will Solemn my opponent's flip if it happens to be something like a, you know, something like a Spy, because that would be kind of trouble. But we do have Snatch, so I don't know. They book it, so obviously they want to protect what they have, and I just set the Solemn, turn the Goblin Attack Force to offensive position, excuse me. The Knight Assailant, our Mystic Swordsman level 2, definitely just going to let that go through, because we're just going to hit in here for 2,100. We have a Ring. This is a pretty good spot to be in. And then I draw into Prima, which is just beautiful. So I decided I'm just going to Solemn like whatever he decides to do in response to this. So might as well use the Mystic Swordsman. That way I can at least continue to have a body on board. Hit the Dekoichi. Swing in there for 2,100 damage with the Goblin Attack Force. We almost got our opponent in Ring range, and this is pretty much over. They go BLS. Who cares? Who cares about BLS? No point in Solemning this, because we have Ring, we have Snatch. This is just looking pretty brutal. Yeah, and then if my opponent were to Solemn back, I would just Solemn, and so that will do it. Just a quick beat down. That's what this does. So like I mentioned, Zing comes in. My opponent opponent sets one. I go DD Assailant first, summon first, in case this is a torrential, and then knock. This is an interesting spot because I think the knee-jerk reaction is to set the ring. But like, what am I going to ring? What is he going to summon that is worth ringing, I guess, is kind of what I'm thinking. He doesn't have Chaos Live. He doesn't have, like, what's he going to summon? I just can't really think of many monsters that I'm dying to ring. Maybe if he goes like Snatch or something, I might, want to consider ringing my own DD Assailant, but maybe not. I don't know. So I actually decided to set the Zing to try to get this set up. I don't want to play into heavy. I thought about setting the ring and the Zing, but I think just setting the Zing is okay. And it pays off. We flip it in the end phase, lock down both of our opponent's spells and traps. Yeah, they use Raigeki Break. Was this the one they set? I don't think so. I remember thinking about this at the time. I was like, was that the one that they just set? No, it wasn't. I think that was the new one they set. Okay, so this is all above board, I think. I can't remember. But regardless, whatever. So, okay, our Zing gets popped. Fair enough. Yeah, that was the one they already had set. I go ahead and decide to summon the tribe. I think that makes sense because I have call to kind of like recur anything. This is one of those things, like sometimes you just have to swing and just go for it. Mainly I'm thinking like if this is a spy or something, I can just attack in and then, use Tribe's effect in main phase 2 to get rid of the spies. But it's a Night Assailant. So we just trade 1 for 1 with one of our monsters, which is fine. We get an Earth into the grave, and we got this call to recur it if needed. The end phase hit our call. I'm a little curious like what my opponent is necessarily on because we see Merchant, we see Dust Tornado, we see Night Assailant. It's like kind of Chaos Turbo, but not necessarily. I know my opponent has Sinister, so I decide not to attack. There's a chance that this could be like another real flip, but at the same time, I want to kind of wait and see. If my opponent doesn't do anything, then I will definitely know that this is the Sinister set. So my opponent summons Tsukiyomi. Have the ring back here to protect it, so no point in Solemning the Suk summon. If they have a knock, it's a little weird, but typically they wouldn't keep knocks in versus this deck. Flip the tribe, just pass. We know that this is a Serpent. My opponent summons Mystic Tomato. MST's my Solemn. And then they book the tribe. So it dies. But all in all, not horrible. I just like Sinister is kind of a problem for this type of deck because especially with like Goblin Attack Force, you just, you have to waste a 2300 beater to just attack through it. So very often, like I just don't want to be like attacking it. Like I just want to get rid of it, knock it, or, swarm the field with return or try to set up a way that I can, attack it and then hit with 2 other monsters or something like that. Pretty simple play here. Just smash the tomato and pass. Like I said, kind of awkward spot. Like I don't necessarily want to be, wasting attacks on the Sinister, but I think it's good to go ahead and start getting after it here. So I summon the Rock Spirit and then normal summon the Goblin Attack Force. Hit in for that 2300. Because even if my opponent were to like summon the Sinister next turn and attack, they're still getting hit for 1500 damage the following turn, and they're getting low. So even if they're up in cards, this is not too bad. I use Lightning Vortex, which caught me off guard a little bit. Fair enough. I draw into Solemn, set it. My opponent goes pot. They start drawing too quickly. But just Solemn it. This is all kind of self-explanatory. Another Solemn. My opponent goes Breaker. We were thinking for a minute about this. Whether I wanted to, spend my life to get rid of this Breaker. I ultimately decided to do it because the Mirror Force is protecting me. I don't really mind, getting super low at this point because my opponent's getting low. So this is easily a deck where like you don't have to think about Solemn as much as you do with like Warriors. I feel like this deck, like if I my opponent does anything, I just kind of want to solve him in a lot of instances. But this was an interesting spot. I don't know if this is correct or not. I decided to summon the Rock Spirit just to put a body on board. I don't think this is necessary, to be honest. I think I'm, kind of playing into like Snatch and stuff like that. I think if this is since it's a special summon, like I can do this at any time. So this isn't completely necessary, I don't think. I just wanted to put like a defensive body on board. My opponent goes Breaker, does the same thing. Tries to swing in with both, but I'll go ahead and use the Mirror Force here. Draw into Graceful. Yeah, here's another one of those like kind of risk reward calculation spots. Basically, I'm thinking like, worst case scenario has a Mirror Force, right? But they could also just have like a single Battle Trap or a copy of Book of Moon or something. And they have already used 2 books, so that's not super likely. But I'm thinking in my head that it's more likely that they have just 1 Battle Trap or like, a book or something like that. Or rather than a full Mirror Force. So I decide to just swing for the fences. I don't know if this is correct, but sometimes, you just send it. This is send-it.deck. And we run face first into the Mirror Force and get absolutely punished. But really, like, we're not in a horrible position. There's still many ways we could steal this game. Return would just go nasty. Return would go absolutely huge. And we haven't seen any yet, so definitely some potential. Tron's Gigantes, great top deck. It's going to allow me to put some more damage on the board. And I'm thinking maybe I just turn this around. But my opponent has Snatch, so we go to game 3. Sometimes you just run into the Mirror Force with a deck like this specifically. Okay, so summon the DD Assailant, set the set the Dust. What's interesting is like if this was a DD Warrior Lady, I wouldn't do this because Breaker really punishes that. But because this is a DD Assailant, the stat line doesn't allow you to get punished in that way. So this is pretty straightforward. My opponent sets a monster, so I'm going to dust it and then get in there with Mystic Swordsman level 2. I also draw into Duo, so I'm just going to use that first. We hit a Sook and a Book. And now we just get after it. I mean, this is what you want. You duo your opponent early when you're on aggressive deck. It is green light, go. Set 2. Now, like, I am kind of wanting to avoid playing into Mirror Force. I know that like I didn't last time, but I think this is a good spot to kind of be just a little bit safer because we're up in cards. Maybe this isn't correct because like if they're on like a kind of turbo-y deck like this, I really don't want to give them a ton of time, but at the same time, I feel like I'm in a really good spot. I'm already putting a lot of pressure on. The only way I lose pressure is if I get Mirror Forced. So I decided to turn the Mystic Swordsman level 2 to defense because even if he like attacks over with something, I can either smash it or attack back over with DD Assailant or whatever. So I just attack with that first, set the Dust. He does that again. I don't need to use this Dust in the end phase because he didn't set anything new. I realized this pretty quickly after I did it that this was a bit of a misplay, but I want to ensure that my attacks are going through. So then I again play around Mirror Force by going Mystic Swords in level 2, attacking first, just getting like that free plus, and now we're just so far ahead. I think I could afford to either set or summon the Jirai Gumo here, or even just like raw summon it, just to put more pressure on board, but I am a little worried about a potential Torrential Tribute, so we're in a good spot, so no need to get crazy. And then we're going to switch again. We're going to pressure with the DD Assailant. Once again, chipping away at our opponent's life. If I had like a Gigantes or a Rock Spirit, I think I probably would continue the aggression because I had some follow-up in case they do Torrential me, plus like the return as well. It'll make that live. So that's why I decided to hold these, but I definitely could see an argument for continuing to just get after it. They go Berserk Gorilla of their own. Interesting. But then I just go Goblin Attack Force. They Torrential. I set the Magic Cylinder. Yeah, I mean, I think that's all fine. Kind of get lucky to draw Nobleman here. This could have been a little awkward, but we knock the Knight Assailant, get after it with the big spider. Call heads. What do we get? Heads. Beautiful. 2200 damage on the nose. We got a Magic Cylinder back here. This is just mind-blowing to me. First off, I end turn. In the end phase, my opponent summons Chaos Sorcerer. Decides not to banish. Decides to just get after it. Maybe he's like worried about return. Fair enough. But, you know, regardless, we get a Magic Cylinder for game. Beautiful. Love it. So, it's kind of a fun game against some sort of Chaos deck. Not really sure. Into another one. This is hilarious, by the way. I'm not going to show, like, I always try to, like, keep people's usernames anonymous, at least in the last few videos I have, just because, I don't know, I just don't want to cause any issues. So, but I will explain some of the chat things that go on in this game, because there is some major salt that happens here. So my opponent goes Pot of Greed, Graceful Charity, Delinquent Duo, which, like, whatever, you know, it happens. I got a Pot of Greed in my own hand, so not the end of the world, but they had a pretty good start, you could say. I see they're on, like, some sort of, you know, Wicked Worm Beast type stuff. I'm thinking maybe it's like the Nanos kind of worm creature swap kind of deck or something like that, or it could be some variant of, like, Burn, which I think maybe that deck has that in there. I don't know. Regardless, I don't know a ton about what this deck does, but, you know, I'm just going to do what I can do. Another thing, in the deck profile, I had a Lily originally that I, like, just took out before I started filming this video. Namely, like, this doesn't make any sense in this deck because we're paying half so often. This can just be a complete dead draw. This wasn't a good inclusion. It was pointed out to me by some of my fellow duelists who have helped me with this deck that probably shouldn't be in there, which makes sense. But in this instance, it's nice. We swing in for 3,400 damage and set the farm. Do I need to set everything here? I don't know. Like, Snatch is kind of weird, I guess. I don't know. I go ahead and just set everything. I wasn't doing a lot of thinking while I was playing this deck. My opponent goes Trunade. And I have to think a little bit about this because, you know, with a deck like this, if he's on this sort of stuff, plays Cat. So I know, like, I can probably die pretty quickly, especially if he has, like, Brain Con or Snatch or a way to, you know, take my Lily. So I decided to go ahead and just say, you know what, if he has the heavy, he has the heavy. If he has all Trin plus heavy and Trunade, then you got it. So I decided to Solemn, and thankfully my opponent does not heavy storm me. They summon a Gigantes of their own. Summon is good. And then they go Brain Con. Card Destruction, okay, for 1. And they swing. I have Mirror Force. And then right here, this is another one of those spots. You just send it. No point in thinking. No point in any of that stuff. Just absolutely send it. I'm just trying to think of, like, what sort of traps this deck plays, and I just couldn't really think of anything. I was like, you know what, if he has, like, a ring, then, you know, he's dead anyway, so screw it. Let's just send it. And let's see what he has back here. Ojama Trio, Just Desserts, and another Ojama Trio. Wait. Aren't I dead? Am I not dead? My opponent scoops, right? Because then if it goes Ojama Trio, and then Just Desserts, 5, 10, 15, 20, 25. Oh, it's only 2,500. Okay. I wasn't dead. I'm sorry. I lied. My math is bad. So anyway, we barely scraped by there. Just absolute going bananas into 3 back row. Who cares? Works out. We get the dub. After our opponent opens full Trinity, by the way. Don't tell me you can't win a game when your opponent opens Trin. Because I just did. Then they duo me game 2, right? Whatever. You know, I'm not too upset. It happens. Sometimes, you know, your opponent's just got the goods. I decided to go ahead and Graceful. I'm trying to set up some sort of, like like double summon play where I can, you know, like summon a Goblin Attack Force and then use like a Rock Spirit or something to really get after it. I decided to go ditch one of the Smashing and the Rhoda. That doesn't make any sense. This doesn't make any sense. I should definitely just ditch the Goblin Attack Force, and if I really want to make that play, just search another one with the Rhoda. Yeah. Not a great move on my part there. But anyway, we're going to swing in for a ton of damage. We got double Solemn set. And we just pass it on over. Opponent goes Last Will, which is fine. We'll just Solemn whatever they try to, you know, summon. Which they go Cat. I Solemn. They go Card Destruction for 1. Revealing a knock. I don't know what, you know, what's going on with these knocks still in here. They go Geometrio. I did think about a bit about this because, like, there's a couple of cards I could lose to if he had like any 2 burn cards or whatever. Because now if I use this and then I summon Gigantes, I guess I still won't lose to Just Desserts. So it would need to be any 2 burn cards to kill me here. But whatever, like I said, you just send it. And so we just go for it. Send him. My opponent says in chat, nice luck. Nice luck, Grace. Even though I opened Trinity turn 1, duo or game 1, duoed you first turn game 2. Whatever, man. Don't keep those knocks in next time. No, I get it, man. I drew kind of good. I had the stuff at the right time. I got pretty lucky with some of my gusto to go for it there. So no hate to my opponent. It was just kind of funny, I thought. I know there's games I've probably done the same thing where I've been salty and I've told my opponent like, yeah, real nice draw or whatever, when, you know, I might have ignored the luck that I got earlier in the game. Because it's not always about like drawing super well. Like, yeah, obviously, like, you know, opening Trin, you should be way up in card advantage. But at the same time, like, it depends on the combination of cards you get at the right time. All right, this is the last match I'm going to show off. This is another one where I'm just going to like raw summon Goblin Attack Force, set these 3, basically just say, deal with it, you know? Especially because I got the Exile to follow up. They go Heavy, I Solemn. They go Tribe. This was an interesting spot. I think after like 5 matches of playing this in this deck, I just decided to just Solemn everything. That's not the right thing to do, but whatever. I decided to do it because he uses normal summon. So like next turn, he's going to be forced to use like a battle trap or some sort of trap on this Goblin Attack Force, or I just kill him. Also, like, I just died a ring now, so I don't know. I think I should have let the Tribe go through, especially because I have DD Assailant to attack back over. But then if he like has a way to deal with the DD Assailant attack, then I'm kind of up a creek a little bit. So yeah, I don't know. It was close there. I decided to just Solemn it anyway. Then right here, I could Solemn the DD Assailant, but like, what are the odds he has Torrential or Mirror Force? I think because he sets 2, I try to not really risk it. So I just send this in first. And you know what? This was another bit of a misplay. I think I should be sending both of these. Namely because I have the Gigantes to follow up in case they do Torrential or Mirror Force. And also because of the fact that I set up my return quicker with Gigantes. And also the fact that my opponent could easily have Trap Dust Shoot. This is a game 1. And I realized that after I attacked with the Goblin Attack Force. So I'm thinking that if I keep this Assailant in hand, if I just wait, then I play into Trap Dust Shoot. I don't want to set it because then I make their Nobleman live because it's still game 1. So I decided to just summon it, and I don't really like that. I should have just summoned it and attacked. And I forget to turn the Goblin Attack Force to defense. I think I did this like 8 times. They go Jar. I see they have a Sinister. It's a little annoying, but you know, whatever. That Goblin Attack Force already did its job. We haven't gotten ringed for game yet, so. And this hand's just looking super explosive. I think I decide to go ahead and just send it all in here. Would that have been game? So it would be 17, 6, I don't know. My math's not good. 2, 4, 6, Oh, and then I returned. So yeah, that definitely would have been game. All right, never mind. But I do just go ahead and go with the Gigantes here. And this is another spot I thought, like, do I just return? Do I just do it just to hit for 2,300? I think the answer is yes. I think I should do this. I don't think I end up doing it, but I definitely should, because we know we have Sinister to wall out some of my attacks. I think just getting a free, like I'm dying to ring anyway in most instances, so why not just get that extra, attack in there with the Goblin attack force, put him really low, and then just completely put the pressure on. So I'm not sure. I think I should have done it, especially knowing like he has no back row. Like you just take 2,300 damage for free. Screw my own life points. So this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm gonna go Mystic Swordsman. Okay, why do I do this as opposed to the Exiled Force? Maybe I just don't believe he has a real back row game one. If he's, on something like this, I imagine this is probably turbo because you see Jar, you see Upstart, but that's not always the case. But I think I just imagine maybe he probably doesn't have a real back row here, and even if this does force out some sort of battle trap, I mean, I won't kill him with return in that case anyway, but yeah, mainly I'm just saying if this is real, then it's real. If it's not, then I win. So then I return for the 1 Goblin attack force, and my opponent admits defeat. See, that is kind of like the template for how most of my game wins went with this deck. When you use return, it's just a little extra gas to kind of get you over the finish line. I really like it. I really like it in this deck. All right. Game 2. Opponent goes Graceful. Like, I see the discard Jar and card destruction, which, like if they're really on turbo, like, I don't know. This doesn't seem very good. I would definitely hold it until you have something better. So I had to go ahead and go Graceful first because I'm thinking I have like a pretty busted hand here, especially with heavy. Like I can do a lot of damage. Is there any world I had game here? Let me look at things. So I would go 3,400 with Lily, so 3,000, and then I could, if I ditch Goblin attack force, but then I won't have a target for Prima. So this is another change I made to the deck. I took out Prima as well, namely because like we're gonna be low on life a lot, and I just felt like I needed another monster into the deck. I think it was because after this match I realized like I could have game if I like had a real monster that wouldn't get banished. I don't know what I'm talking about. Don't listen to me. Regardless, I changed Prima out. I kept calling, but Prima went. Those are the only two changes, the Lily and the Prima, that are no longer in the list at the moment. So I decide to ditch these two so that I can go like Goblin attack force Gigantes. I decide to not go for the game shot, but I do decide to basically almost get there. Like, I don't know if I just missed game here. I'm not sure. But regardless, we're pumping out some serious damage. Miss the coin toss, so we take a cool 3,600. Yeah, if I summon Lily, I get my opponent low. I don't know why I don't do Lily. That makes the most sense. Yeah, I'm just trying to see, was there a way that I could have like graceful to, use 2 special summons plus the Primo to put 4 monsters on board, which would have instantly been game? Maybe. I don't know. I'm sure somebody will let me know in the comments. I don't claim to be good at this game. But regardless, you don't have to be good when you can just get your opponent down to 1,600 life points on turn 2. My opponent summons Kaiku, which at this point I'm like, what's that going to do? What are you going to do with the Kaiku? Torrential's gone, so not sure why I summoned this. I think I do the same kind of reasoning I had earlier in the other match where I ran into, a mirror force with 3 monsters, is that I'm thinking that his, chance of having like a single battle trap like a Saku, that you can run 3 of, is higher than him having the 1 Mirror Force. And so if he does happen to have, a Saku, and I just swing with 2 monsters, then I won't be able to end the game. So I want to go for game here. I think though, like I should probably not do this unless I have an extender, like a Gigantes or something. My opponent shows they have double knock, Sork. Yeah, these probably shouldn't still be in the deck. Game 2, but that was a quick one. I think that game lasted like 4 minutes. That is about it. This is Earth Return. Thank you all for watching. Please consider subscribing if you're not. I've really been amazed with, we've passed 500 now. It's awesome. And I love, seeing the channel continue to grow. I never want to push things on anyone, but yeah, consider it if you enjoyed this video. Try this deck out if you want. Take it to your locals. And yeah, thank you so much for hanging around. Until the next one.